estate markets than we'd experienced since 2017. So, we had resales we're starting to get double digits, maybe even too hot in terms of price growth on an annual basis. I mean, the condo market in Toronto was just been, unbelievable over the last 4 years. I mean, 2016, 10% price growth, 2017, 35% price growth, 2018, 20% price growth, 2019, 10%. And then already in 2020, it was going up. So just really unbelievable growth, maybe even too much growth in terms of how unaffordable it was getting for the average person. So, everyone kind of, took a step back once the lockdown started, and definitely there was clients of mine that had sites tied up that immediately dropped them and said, we're not gonna purchase those sites. But I work with a lot of rental developers, and they're still moving forward. Development is a long timeline. It takes 2-3 years to get something approved, another a year and a half to get it leased up. So and in terms of the condo market, it might take a year and a half to sell it, and then you have 2-3 years, maybe 4 years to build the thing. So it's quite a long process. So to make any sweeping decisions within the first 2 months of the pandemic, people aren't doing that. But lenders are going to be cautious in terms of who they give land loans to, are going to be cautious in who they give construction loans to, especially with the sites not being able to maybe function as quickly as they have in the past because of social distancing, because of availability of product. So a lot of things moving and shaking. Luckily for my business personally, it's been pretty busy over the last couple of weeks, mostly rental studies. People are still moving forward with their rental buildings. They still, if you're in the development game, you still fundamentally believe in the long-term value of Toronto and people's desire to be here.
Now, Ben, one of the things that I really like about the stuff you put out and the stuff you talk about is, this is going to have, there's immediate effects on the rental market. There's immediate effects on condos. There's immediate effects on all the various things we're talking about. But there's going to be social impacts here. There's going to be behavioral changes that I'm curious to see how your thoughts on. I know we're going to dig deeper into this, so we don't want to go too deep today. But, I'm thinking about densification in cities. I mean, everyone has been pushing so aggressively across Canada for densification. When something like COVID-19 hits, densification is actually a problem now. Are people's social norms going to change? Are people's behavioral is going to change? Are legalities going to change? What are your kind of just thoughts on that? And I know we'll dig much deeper, but I'm curious to see your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think people like being downtown. I mean, young people like to be where the action is, where the restaurants are, where the bars are, where the single people are at. They like to be able to walk to their job as opposed to take transit. So, we've seen this, transformation in where young people want to live. And now, because of affordability, we've seen more people starting families in condominiums and staying downtown as opposed to moving out to the suburbs. And so it'll be interesting to see what changes. I know when the lockdown officially ends that a lot of employers will start only having, their employees in, maybe 2 days a week as opposed to 5 days a week. And maybe they make that permanent. Maybe they reduce their office space that they take. And start having their workforce work, half or more at home and only come into the office at a smaller point in time. So maybe you don't need to live right downtown where the most expensive real estate is. Maybe you can, in a Toronto sense, live in a Scarborough or a Etobicoke, or live in the, live in the suburbs and take
maybe in the upper beaches, for example.
Yeah. Well, the upper beaches, luckily the GO train, it only takes 10 minutes to get from here to downtown. So this is where I'm at is definitely a centralized location, but in the end, I think when the vaccine is found and people stop worrying about the pandemic, they're going to want to be downtown. They're going to want to be where the action is. I think there'll always be value in being right in the core, right where the entertainment is, especially among younger people. And we'll even see, retirees. I mean, they still like to be in the action and have a place downtown as well. So, I think in the short term, maybe 2 years while they're working on this vaccine. That seems to be the number that gets thrown around pretty frequently, a year to 2 years to come up with a vaccine. I think maybe in that point in time, maybe there's a shift in how people buy real estate. But I think in the long term, downtown will always be, the most desirable spot where most of the jobs are located, and young people are going to want to be down there.
It's such an interesting time right now because there's so many parts and pieces to put together. So as I'm listening, into this conversation, when we look at economists, we've followed 6 and 8 economists, and none of them have the same answer. None of them have the same view of the world. It's all different. Some of it's significantly, by the way, and that's fine. Nobody's been through a pandemic before. It goes back to that little meme, right? If you've been through one pandemic, you've been through one pandemic, right? Because nobody's ever done it before. So, but when you talk about densification and consumer habits, so to your point, Ben, I mean, people were all trending downtown. That was the cool cat thing kind of do, like, let's live downtown, walkability, let's not drive a car, let's save on insurance, save on gas, we can spend more on a place we live, all of those consumer habits. But I think there's a disruption. I have a tendency to agree with you that young people are pretty bulletproof. They're pretty, like, we all remember that time when we were young where, we were afraid really of nothing. We really felt we were bulletproof. So does COVID affect most kids? I don't think so. I don't want to minimize how they think, but I just don't think so. I think they're pretty bulletproof, and that's fine. That's the coolness of being youthful, right? So downtown could appeal. But one of the fundamentals that I have some kind of that I'm looking at when I'm doing my own research is these smaller centers. What's the tax base going to be? Like, how are they, if unemployment is high and businesses aren't recovering in these smaller centers, how are they going to actually support it? But as I'm listening to you talk about densification, people are going, I don't know, it's too tight. I'm not going to be living downtown. Where are they going to go? Well, there's a pretty good chance that they're going to move to these smaller centers, which might be, in fact, the savior for some of these small centers, because their tax base would increase by having people move out to it. They might even experience little housing booms if they're close enough to the city. So it's an interesting time when we look at that point of densification and what's going to happen, and a break in consumer spending habits. So what does this all lead to? That was just kind of my view of the world when that little riff that you did. But ultimately, we're looking at what the economics are and where builders are going to go, and what does it mean to us as real estate investors. I love the point that you made, Ben, around that window from the time a developer says, I'm going to start building. And it's a process, isn't it? So as real estate investors, we're looking at where do we enter that conversation, enter that investment journey. And so when you look out, let's say 5 years, are you pretty optimistic about what's going to happen in that GTA?
Yeah, I'm definitely optimistic. I mean, I think Toronto is one of the more dynamic places in the world. I mean, I haven't done much traveling outside of North America, but I've basically been to every major city in the United States. Somehow I haven't been to LA, but otherwise I've been to every major city in the United States. And in Toronto, stacks up extremely well to all those places. And I think now with the politics that are happening in the United States, Canada is just that much more desirable. So, and I think there'll be a pent up demand once the borders start to open again for people to want to come to Toronto. And obviously we talk a lot about the multicultural nature of Toronto and the desirability of Toronto. So in the long term, I'm bullish. I mean, in terms of investors, especially pre-construction condo investors, they really need to do their homework, right? And understand which projects are potentially overvalued and which projects are in locations that can grow in the future and add more buildings and add more density and become much more desirable places to live, and which ones are kind of isolated that won't grow in those same ways. So there's always much research to be done, and obviously you're an organization that helps your members do that, and I think that's extremely important. I mean, there's a lot of good real estate agents out there, but there's also a lot of them that are, looking out for their commissions, right? So you do need to be cautious of that, and make sure that they're pushing you. Which project are they pushing you to? Are they pushing you to the one that they get a 5% commission, or are they pushing you to the one that they really think is maximizing your potential return?
Well, I think it's very interesting that you say that, and I'm really excited because I saw you recently published a report on the rental housing prediction report, along with rentals.ca, and I'm really excited to talk about that at SOS, at the COVID crisis conference we're doing. But before we get to the predictions, I want to talk about the future of cities. Can you give us one or two interesting things, outliers that you think of what's coming for the future of cities? We talked about this change of sociability, this change of housing, this possible change that might happen. How do you see the future of cities?
Wow, that's a big question. I think it's a big question. Just to get back to what Patrick was saying in terms of, about sometimes economists say, okay, on one hand this, on the other hand that, and I was saying, maybe people are not going to be as in the short term wanting to live downtown because maybe they're not going to be working as many days in their office downtown, but maybe it's the opposite. Maybe they're afraid to be on transit because they're stuck in a very small place with a lot of different people. Maybe they're going to put an even higher value on being able to walk to work, so they're outside. I think they said in Ontario there's only one person that contracted COVID-19 from being outside, and everyone else that's contracted is contracted from being inside. So if you feel confident in your workplace but not confident in your transit, then maybe you want to make sure that you're close, or you want to make sure that you're working somewhere that has a dedicated parking spot for you so you can drive to it. So I think that but in the long term, I think we're going to find something to fix this, and it won't be a pandemic forever, right? We'll find the antidote, and I think that the key will be good transit, right? We need to be able to build cities to get people to their jobs, and that's, I think, we just listened to an interesting podcast by this guy named the person on there was Alan Berteau, and you should definitely listen to him. He's a planner by trade, but he's lived in a bunch of cities all across the world. He says the key is just the speed of transit. So we need to be able to move people from all over the region to be able to get them to their jobs, as opposed to maybe adding more lines. Let's make sure we're adding lines that are faster, that can get people from different parts of the region. So I'm hoping that we can somehow figure out how to do rapid transit. So maybe we can, have people that live in Woodstock, Ontario, and they can work in downtown Toronto. Maybe they can, live in Orillia and work downtown Toronto and be able to get there in 15 minutes as opposed to an hour and a half, right? I think that'll be an interesting shift in the way things do. Obviously there's a 3 or 4 years.
Ben, it takes an hour and a half to get from Markham to downtown Toronto. So.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm on Sunday morning at 4 a.m. Timing. But I think transit's going to be huge in terms of changing the face of cities. But in terms of other things, I don't know. I hope that Toronto and other cities make an effort to allow more housing supply where there's jobs. I think that's the key, and stop being so protective of heritage and shadows and all those silly things that drive up the price of housing.
Well, Patrick, one of the things I absolutely love about having a guy like Ben come out to the COVID crisis conference is, here you got a guy who crunches numbers, gets paid to crunch big numbers by big companies with deep pockets. He does a lot of number crunching. He does a lot of research. And I'm super pumped that he's going to be able to share that with our members. He's going to be able to share that with the community. He's going to be able to share that in terms of his predictions on where the rental housing market's going and how we can stay ahead of the curve. Ben, this conference is all about strategies, opportunities, and solutions for our members to stay ahead of the curve, because there will be some changes. And as an investor, if you're one step ahead, you're one step protected. And that's what's exciting. I'm excited about having you to the conference, pal.
Great. Thank you. Looking
Thanks
forward
for
to
joining us, Ben. Looking forward to digging into it. We're going to have a bigger conversation on SOS. It'll be even more current because things are changing a lot between now and then. So it'll be a great conversation. Looking forward to it, Ben.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
See you there.